1984, a cadet at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point pens an article for the Military Review Journal. The title is innocuous, but the content will shake the Pentagon to its core. He writes, and I quote, "The doctrine employed by the German army from 1917 to 1945 and its underlying philosophy bears a striking resemblance to what we are trying to instill today." A cadet, not even an officer. But he had spoken the truth, what everyone inside the Pentagon knew, but no one wanted to admit publicly. The U.S. Army's AirLand battle doctrine, America's official combat doctrine since 1982, was a copy of German tactics from World War II, a copy of the Wehrmacht, a copy of what Tiger units had perfected on the battlefield. And over the next decade, dozens of articles would appear in Military Review, written by U.S. officers and civilians alike, all discussing the German military tradition. The admiration for the Wehrmacht became so widespread that historians even gave the phenomenon a name, Wehrmacht mystique. No joke. This is a documented term in American military history. You'll find it in academic publications, in doctoral dissertations, in official analyses from the Pentagon. But wait, it gets even better. 1991, Operation Desert Storm. The largest armored operation since World War II, Saddam Hussein's army, the fourth largest in the world, is annihilated in 100 hours. And how? With a maneuver the Americans called Hail Mary, a massive left hook, armored divisions racing across the desert deep into the enemy's flank, bypassing the main defensive lines, crushing the rear guard before the front could even react. Historians like Robert Citino, a professor at the University of North Texas, have documented it. In his book, Blitzkrieg to Desert Storm, he writes, "In no uncertain terms, the Hail Mary maneuver of Desert Storm was a classic example of the AirLand battle doctrine in action." But what was AirLand battle? Really, it was the Schwerpunkt tactic, the focus on the enemy's center of gravity. It was Auftragstactik, mission-type tactics, where initiative is key. It was combined arms. It was everything that German panzer divisions, especially Tiger units, had developed and perfected during the Second World War. Today, I'm going to show you the documented lineage, from the Tiger tactics of 1944 to the M1 Abrams in the Iraqi desert in 1991, and on to Ukraine in 2024, where these same principles still hold true. 80 years, the same doctrine, different name, and Germany never received a dime in royalties. Let's start with the foundation. Karl von Clausewitz, 1830, Prussian general and military theorist. His book, On War, is still required reading at every military academy in the world, from West Point to Sandhurst, from St. Cyr to the Frunze Academy. Clausewitz articulated the Schwerpunkt principle, the concentration of force against a carefully selected point, the Schwerpunkt, the center of gravity of the enemy. The idea was revolutionary for its time. Instead of spreading forces evenly, you concentrated everything on a single point of breakthrough, a single devastating blow. Break through, roll up, annihilate. The Prussian army perfected this tactic in the wars of German unification, 1866 against Austria, 1870 against France. Both times, the enemy was defeated through concentrated attacks at critical points, but the real revolutions that came later. 1940, France, the Wehrmacht, took the Schwerpunkt principle even further. The tactics they employed involved a dividing thrust on a narrow front. Battle groups with tanks, dive bombers, and motorized artillery. The goal, to breach the enemy's main line of defense at the Schwerpunkt. 6 weeks. France capitulated, the same tactic that had taken Prussia 9 months. In 1870, but what really shocked the world wasn't just the speed, it was the manner. Heinz Guderian, the famous German panzer commander, had developed a military strategy that put tanks at the center of the battle. Guderian envisioned armored columns, leading the spearhead of an army, supported by air power, followed by infantry units, mopping up any remaining pockets of resistance. This was the combined arms approach. Tanks, air force, artilleries and infantry, working as one unit, each branch of service compensating for the weaknesses of the others. Together, they were more than the sum of their parts. And the irony, the German tanks were probably inferior to both the British and French tanks in 1940, technically, but because of their speed and their determination to break through without worrying about the flanks, they were far more devastating in their tactics. That was the lesson that no one wanted to learn. It wasn't about the hardware, it was about the doctrine, it was about the mindset, and that mindset had a name: Auftragstactik, mission-type tactics, command tactics, where formal rules could be selectively overridden to overcome points of friction. The commander specifies the objective. The execution is left to the subordinate. Initiative is not only allowed, but expected, even demanded. This was radical. In most armies of the world, non-commissioned officers and lieutenants waited for orders from above. In the Wehrmacht, they acted independently when the situation required it. A German first lieutenant could make a decision that in the British Army would be the responsibility of a brigadier general. That made the Wehrmacht fast, flexible, dangerous, and nowhere was this combination of Schwerpunkt, combined arms, and Auftragstactik better demonstrated than in the Tiger units. 1943, Eastern Front, the heavy tank battalions of the Wehrmacht received their Tiger tanks, 62 tons. The 88mm gun, originally an anti-aircraft weapon, could penetrate any Allied tank at 2,000 meters, a range that no other tank in the world could match. But the Tiger wasn't just a weapon. It was a doctrine. Tiger units never operated alone. They led mixed battle groups, Tigers as the core, Panzerfouls for flank security, assault guns as mobile artillery, Panzer Grenadiers for infantry support, Pioneers for obstacle removal, and Flakpanzer for air defense, and the Luftwaffe, always the Luftwaffe, ground attack aircraft like the Focke-Wulf 190 or the Henschel 129 Stuka Nachfolger worked directly with ground units. Close air support in the literal sense. Pilots and tank commanders spoke to each other over the radio. That was combined arms at the highest level. The tactic was always the same. Reconnaissance identified the Schwerpunkt, the point where the enemy was most vulnerable. Then concentrate force. Tiger tanks break through. Accompanying elements roll forward. The rear guard is destroyed before reinforcements can arrive. The Soviets called it the Cauldron. Kesselschlacht. Encirclement and annihilation, and the numbers spoke for themselves. At Kursk in 1943, Tiger units recorded kill ratios of 10-1. For every Tiger lost, 10 Soviet tanks were destroyed. Some units even reached 15-1. The Schwer Panzer Regiment, 501, reported a ratio of 13-1 throughout the entire operation. Michael Wittmann, the most famous Tiger commander, destroyed 14 tanks and 15 British troop transports in a single day at Villers-Bocage. In less than 15 minutes, a single Tiger against an entire column. That wasn't technology alone. That was doctrine in perfection. It wasn't just about the technology. It was about the doctrine. A tiger alone was vulnerable. A tiger as part of a battle group, with air support, artillery, and infantry, was nearly invincible. The Allies learned that the hard way. But what happened after the war? Operation Paperclip brought scientists to America. Most people know that. Werner von Braun became the father of the American space program. What's less well known, it wasn't just scientists who came, tacticians came too. Wehrmacht officers were systematically interrogated, their experiences documented, their methods analyzed. The US Army Foreign Military Studies program collected hundreds of reports. German generals and staff officers wrote treatises on their tactics, their successes, their failures. These documents were classified for decades, and during that time, the US Army developed its own doctrine, based on these reports, based on German experiences, based on Tiger tactics. 1973 marked the turning point. The active defense concept emerged. The US Army tried to find an answer to the Warsaw Pact's numerical superiority. If the enemy had more tanks, you needed better tactics. And where did they find better tactics? In the reports of German generals, who recognized that numerical inferiority could be offset by tactical superiority, exactly what the Wehrmacht had demonstrated against the Soviets. Always outnumbered, yet often victorious, at least tactically. 1982 brought the revolution. AirLand battle became the official doctrine of the US Army. The name was new, the content was old. At the heart of this doctrine were the key concepts: initiative, depth, agility, and synchronization. Initiative. Acting before the enemy can react. Schwerpunkt principle. Center of gravity, depth, not just attacking the front, but the entire depth of the enemy's space. Rear guard, logistics, command structures, Tiger tactics of encirclement, Kesselschlacht, agility, rapid regrouping, exploiting opportunities, off-trags tactic, mission-type tactics, synchronization, all arms working together, air and ground, combined arms. A West Point officer wrote in 1984 in Military Review Journal, "A study of military history shows that the doctrine of the German army from 1917 to 1945 and its underlying philosophy bears a strong resemblance to what we are trying to imprint today." That was no hidden illusion. That was an open admission. The US Army was copying the Wehrmacht. And in the years that followed, the Pentagon became a Wehrmacht study group. Dozens of articles appeared in Military Review. American officers analyzed German tactics. Wehrmacht commanders were quoted like saints: Guderian, Manstein, Rommel. Their books became required reading. Robert Citino, who is now considered a leading expert on German military history, has documented this phenomenon. He calls it the Wehrmacht mystique, the American military's fascination with German warfare. But was it just fascination, or was it something more? Let's look at the facts. AirLand battle emphasized close coordination between land forces, acting as an aggressively maneuvering defense, and air forces attacking enemy supply lines. Just as Germany in the interwar period emphasized the role of armored and mechanized forces in conjunction with air forces, so the AirLand battle doctrine emphasizes the role of integrated combat. The parallels are not subtle. They are identical. Schwerpunkt becomes sector of main effort. Off-trags tactic becomes mission command. Combined arms remains combined arms. Even the terminology was only translated, not changed. And then came the test. 1991, Kuwait, Iraq. Saddam Hussein had the fourth largest army in the world, over 1 million men under arms, thousands of tanks, fortified positions in the desert. The Saddam Line. 300 kilometers of fortifications. The coalition under American leadership had one task: liberate Kuwait. And how did they do it? With the Hail Mary maneuver, a huge left hook through the desert. Armored divisions that started 200 kilometers to the west raced through desolate desert, penetrated deep into the flank of the Iraqi army, destroyed the rearguard before the front could react. That was no new tactic. That was Kursk 1943, only with M1 Abrams instead of Tiger tanks. That was Schwerpunkt, concentrating all forces on a breakthrough point. That was combined arms, air forces destroying command and communication structures while ground troops broke through. That was Auftrags tactic, commanders on the ground making decisions without waiting for orders from Washington. 100 hours. Iraq's army was annihilated, the fastest armored maneuver since World War II. And as with the Wehrmacht in 1940, the success was not due to technical superiority alone. Yes, the M1 Abrams was better than the T-72, but not 10 times better. The real difference was Doctrine, the same doctrine that Tiger units had developed 50 years prior. Robert Citino writes in Blitzkrieg to Desert Storm, "In this direct comparison, with an example of successfully applied Blitzkrieg principles, it becomes clear that there are similarities between Blitzkrieg and AirLand battle, not least the use of combined arms, mission-type tactics, and the primacy of operational maneuver." Citino goes even further. He calls AirLand battle a high-tech version of Blitzkrieg, and nobody in the Pentagon disagreed because it was true. But here's where it gets interesting. Do you know where I know all this from? From American sources, from Pentagon documents, from US Army publications. The Americans admit it openly, documented in their own journals. They studied the Wehrmacht, they copied their tactics, they rebranded them and sold them as their own. And Germany never saw a cent for it. No royalties, no acknowledgement, no gratitude. Instead, German generals were convicted as war criminals while their tactics were being taught at West Point. But wait, it gets even better. Ukraine 2024 proves that these principles are still valid. Historian Anthony Beaver, one of the most respected experts on World War II, observed the Russian invasion of Ukraine and noted, "Russia's tank employment has been very unimpressive and quite astonishing in the way they have repeated the mistakes of World War II. They have sent tanks straight down roads, where blocking one or two stops the entire column." That was exactly the mistake the Red Army made at Kursk in 1943, and the Germans exploited it then, just as the Ukrainians are exploiting it today. The lessons are the same. Combined arms. Never use tanks alone. Always with infantry, artillery, air support, and electronic warfare. Auftrags tactic, mission-type tactics. Commanders on the ground must be able to make decisions. In Ukraine, sometimes an NCO with a drone decides the life and death of an armored column. Schwerpunkt, center of gravity, concentration of force. Not a little bit everywhere, but everything at one point. But 2024 also has new elements. Drones, FPV drones, that for $500. Can destroy a tank worth millions. One expert estimates that loitering munitions are now responsible for 34% of vehicle losses, followed by anti-tank guided missiles at 26%, mines and IEDs at 20%. And traditional artillery at just 12%. The Tiger units of 1943 didn't know drones, but they knew the principle: adaptation, evolution, survival, hull-down positioning, where tanks use terrain to expose only their turrets. It's a tactic that's centuries old. It has found renewed importance in a battlefield saturated with drones and precision-guided weapons. Tiger commanders knew this already. Camouflage, cover, firing position, and integration. Modern warfare is no longer about tanks operating alone. It is increasingly about integration. In combined arms operations, tanks work alongside infantry, unmanned aerial vehicles, engineers, and artillery in tightly coordinated attacks. That's combined arms in 2024. That's Tiger tactics in 1943. Only the name has changed. But how did this happen? How did Wehrmacht Doctrine become NATO Doctrine? The answer lies in the post-war years. 1945. Germany surrendered, but the war against the Soviet Union was only just beginning, at least in the minds of Western strategists. And who knew best how to fight the Soviets? The Germans. 4 years on the Eastern Front. Millions dead, thousands of battles. The Wehrmacht had more experience fighting the Red Army than any other force in history. The US Army Foreign Military Studies program began immediately after the war. German generals weren't being interrogated to uncover war crimes. They were being consulted. Franz Halder, former Chief of Staff of the Army, became head of a historical division. He coordinated the work of over 200 former Wehrmacht officers. They wrote reports about their experiences, tactical analyses, strategic assessments, over 2,000 documents in total. These reports fed directly into American military planning. Erich von Manstein, the most brilliant operational mind of the Wehrmacht, wrote his memoirs. Lost Victories became required reading at American military academies. It is still read at West Point today. Heinz Guderian, the father of armored warfare, became a sought-after consultant. His book, Achtung Panzer, became the Bible of armored warfare. Their tactics, their experiences, their mistakes and successes were systematically documented and then transformed into American Doctrine. FM 105. Operations. The U.S. Army's Manual for Operations. In the 1982 edition, you find the principles of AirLand battle. Initiative. Seize the initiative. Schwerpunkt. Center of gravity. By another name. Agility. Move faster than the enemy. Off-trags tactic. Mission-type tactics. By another name. Depth. Attack across the full depth of the battlefield. Encirclement. By another name. Synchronization. Coordinate all elements of combat power. Combined arms. By another name. The translation was so direct, it was almost embarrassing, and the Americans knew it. A 1990 RAND report on the lessons of AirLand battle directly acknowledges the German roots. NATO planners responded to the Warsaw Pact's numerical superiority by emphasizing rapid reinforcement, mechanized forces, and mobile defense strategies. In the 1980s, this culminated in the development of the AirLand battle doctrine. Mobile defense, exactly what the Wehrmacht practiced in the East in 1943. Elastic defense, tactical retreat, counterattack into the flank, Tiger tactics. But there's even more direct proof. 1984. The U.S. Air Force's Tactical Air Command was developing its doctrine for close air support. The model? The cooperation between the Air Force and the Army in World War II. Fighter bombers communicating directly with tank units. Stuka pilots receiving target assignments from tank commanders. That was the model for what the Americans called close air support. And the A-10 Thunderbolt, the iconic ground attack aircraft of the U.S. Air Force. Its tactics were based on the lessons learned from the Henschel H's 129 slow, heavily armored, massive cannon. Designed for tank destroyal, the GAU-8 Avenger, the A-10's 30mm cannon, is conceptually an evolution of the Mk-108 used in German ground attack aircraft, but that's another story. Today, it's about tactics, and the tactics are clear. NATO studied Tiger tactics for 80 years. They copied Schwerpunkt, The Schwerpunkt, that is the center of gravity and the point of main effort, Auftragstaktik, or mission-type tactics and combined arms. They called it AirLand battle, and they won the Cold War with it. Operation Desert Storm was the proof. 100 hours, total victory, minimal casualties. The Iraqi army, trained according to Soviet doctrine, was defeated by an army that used German doctrine. The irony was perfect. General Norman Schwarzkopf, the commander of the coalition forces, studied military history intensely. He knew Heinz Guderian, he knew Erich von Manstein, he knew the encirclement battles of the Eastern Front. And the irony? The Soviet deep operations theory, against which AirLand battle was developed, itself had German roots. Mikhail Tukhachevsky, the Soviet marshal who developed deep operations in the 1920s, studied at German military academies, in secret. During the Weimar Republic, when Germany and the Soviet Union were still cooperating, he learned Schwerpunkt, he learned combined arms, and he developed the Soviet doctrine from it, which was then adopted by the Warsaw Pact, against which, in turn, AirLand battle was developed, a circle of German tactics. Both sides of the Cold War used German concepts. Both sides based their doctrines on Schwerpunkte, that center of gravity. Both sides practiced what German tank units had perfected in World War II, but only one side was condemned for it. The Wehrmacht was classified as a criminal organization. Its officers were treated as war criminals, while their tactics were taught at West Point and the Frunze Academy. That's the irony of history, an irony that no one openly discusses, an irony that isn't in any history book, an irony that the Pentagon would rather keep quiet. But the documents speak for themselves. The articles in the Military Review Journal speak for themselves. Robert Citino's books speak for themselves. Today, it's even more extreme. 2024, Ukraine. Western militaries are analyzing the fighting. They're studying how drones are changing warfare. They're developing new tactics. But the basic principles? They remain the same. A Ukrainian tank commander summed it up. Tanks will still exist in the future, but FPV drones have changed tank warfare forever. Changed. Forever? No. Adapted. Like Tiger units adapted to Soviet tank swarms. Like Wehrmacht engineers adapted to enemy minefields. Like paratroopers adapted to anti-aircraft fire. Evolution, not revolution. The basic principles remain. Combined arms. Integration of all arms, Schwerpunkt, concentration of forces, Auftragstaktik. Decentralized decision-making, that's Tiger tactics, that's AirLand battle, that's modern warfare, 3 names, 1 concept. If you appreciate these connections, if you want to understand how German engineering and military doctrine have shaped the world, then support this channel. The Super Thanks button below this video allows me to continue researching, to continue documenting, to continue showing the truth that is often missing in official history books. Every contribution helps. Every share spreads the knowledge. Let me summarize. 1943, Tiger units perfected combined arms on the Eastern Front. Schwerpunkt attacks. Auftragstaktik. Integration of tanks, infantry, artillery, and air force. 1945, the U.S. Army Foreign Military Studies program began to systematically document German experiences. Over 200 former Wehrmacht officers wrote reports. 1973, Active Defense Doctrine, first adaptation of German tactics to the Cold War. 1982, AirLand battle becomes official U.S. Army doctrine. Schwerpunkt becomes sector of main effort. Auftragstaktik becomes mission command. 1984. A West Point cadet writes openly in Military Review that AirLand battle copies Wehrmacht doctrine. 1991. Operation Desert Storm. The Hail Mary maneuver demonstrates AirLand battle in practice. Tiger tactics under a new name, 2024, Ukraine. The same principles still apply. Combined arms, Schwerpunkt, Auftragstaktik. 80 years, the same doctrine, only the name has changed. And Germany. Germany never received a cent in royalties. No acknowledgement, no thanks. Instead, their generals were condemned, while their ideas conquered the world. Silently, in secret. That's the true story of Tiger tactics. Not the tank itself, but the mindset behind it. Schwerpunkt, combined arms, Auftragstaktik. 3 words that defined modern warfare. 3 words that came from Germany. 3 words that no one paid for. Not the Americans, not the British, not NATO. Until now. Now it's your turn. Did NATO copy German tactics, or was it natural evolution? Is AirLand battle theft or homage? Write your opinion in the comments. And if you want to learn more about the hidden German roots of modern technology, subscribe to this channel, activate the bell, become part of our community. The next revelation is coming soon. We will uncover more connections that no one wants to see. Until then, farewell.